No x-rays, no antibiotics, no blood transfusion. In 1893, a doctor in Chicago cut open a man's chest with nothing but a scalpel. He found the wound near the heart. The organ was still beating. He picked up a needle and began to sew the torn tissue back together. The patient walked out 51 days later. He lived another 20 years. Most doctors at the time said it simply could not be done. The surgeon was one of only 3 black doctors in all of Chicago. Before medical school, he had earned his living as a barber. His name was Daniel Hale Williams. He changed the history of medicine forever, and almost nobody alive today knows who he was. To understand how a barber ended up cutting into a beating heart, we need to start at the very beginning of his remarkable life. Daniel Hale Williams was born January 18, 1856 in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. His father was a barber and an activist. His father, Daniel Jr., worked with the Equal Rights League. His mother was Sarah Price Williams. The family was of mixed race. When Daniel was about 10 years old, his father caught tuberculosis. The disease took him. The family was shattered almost overnight. His mother could not support all the children on her own. They were sent away to live with relatives. The family was torn apart. Daniel ended up in Baltimore, apprenticed to a shoemaker. He hated every minute of it. Before long, he left and never looked back. He made his way to Janesville, Wisconsin, and opened his own barbershop. He was following in his father's footsteps, cutting hair. This was America in the late 1870s. Reconstruction had ended, Jim Crow was rising. Racial separation was now the law. White hospitals refused to treat black patients. They also refused to let black doctors or nurses practice inside their buildings. The American Medical Association shut its doors to black physicians. The most powerful body in medicine would not let them in. Across the nation, only about 900 black doctors served over 7 million African Americans. The system was built to fail. In Chicago, roughly 15,000 black residents had almost no access to proper care. Doctors treated patients at kitchen tables. Black surgeons operated on dining room tables in homes. No hospital would give them an operating room or let them through the door. Williams saw this every day. People were not dying because of bad doctors. They were dying because the system refused to help them. But back in Wisconsin, something had changed his life. He met a surgeon named Henry Palmer, one of the finest doctors in the state. Palmer mentored Williams from 1878 to 1880. He taught him anatomy, technique, and discipline. Williams decided to pursue medicine. He entered Chicago Medical College, now Northwestern. His tuition was partly funded by Mary Jane Richardson Jones, a black activist. In 1883, Williams earned his medical degree. He was now one of just 3 black doctors practicing in the entire city of Chicago. He opened a practice on the South Side. He joined the State Board of Health. He taught anatomy at Northwestern. His name was rising. But none of that fixed the real problem. Black patients were still turned away. Black nurses had nowhere to train. Nothing changed. Around 1889, a young black woman named Emma Reynolds applied to every nursing school in Chicago. She wanted to become a nurse badly. Every school rejected her. Not because she could not do the work. They turned her away for one reason only: the color of her skin. Her brother, Reverend Louis Reynolds, brought her story to Williams. He asked if there was anything at all that could be done. Williams could have said he was sorry and moved on, but he was not the kind of man who accepted things the way they were. Not ever. He believed that a people who do not make provision for their own sick and suffering are not worthy of civilization. His own words: if no hospital would treat black patients and train black nurses, then he would build one himself. That was his answer. Build it. May 4th, 1891. Provident Hospital opened at 29th and Dearborn, south side of Chicago. 12 beds, one small building. It was the first interracial hospital in the United States. Black and white patients side by side, black and white staff together. Williams did not just build a hospital. He built a training program for black nurses and doctors. He was creating the next wave. Emma Reynolds was in that first class. She became the first black woman to earn a medical degree from Northwestern University in 1895. Under Williams, Provident had an 87% recovery rate. That was higher than many white hospitals at the very same time. He adopted sterilization early. He kept up with every new technique. Provident was not just good for a black hospital, it was good. And then, on a hot evening in July of 1893, everything Williams had built was about to face the most extreme test of his career. On the night of July 9th, a young man named James Cornish was rushed into Provident Hospital. He had a deep wound in his chest. Cornish was 24 years old. He had been attacked in a bar fight. A blade had gone deep into his left side, near the heart. The wound barely bled at first. That was a dangerous sign. It meant the damage was internal. Williams suspected the heart was hit. There were no X-rays. That technology would not exist for 2 more years. Williams had no way to see inside. He could only listen. The medical consensus in 1893 was clear. Surgery on the human heart was forbidden. The profession believed it would always be fatal. No antibiotics, no blood transfusions, no cardiac tools. If he operated, his only instruments would be a scalpel, forceps, and thread. If Williams followed the rules of medicine and did nothing, James Cornish would almost certainly be gone within a matter of days. If he operated and failed, the story would not be about a surgeon who tried. It would be about a black surgeon who tried and failed. That failure would not just end his career. It could damage every black physician in the country. He carried far more than one life. But doing nothing meant watching a man die inside a hospital Williams had built to save people like him. He made his decision. Act. Williams called 6 doctors to witness the operation. 4 were white and 2 were black. A rare act of cooperation for that era. Morning of July 10th, 1893. Cornish lay on the table at Provident. The room was small. Light came from gas lamps above the table. Williams prepared the anesthesia. Cornish went under. His heart still beat inside his chest. 6 doctors watched in total silence. Williams picked up the scalpel. He cut a small opening into the chest. Then he carved through the cartilage of the 5th rib. He created a narrow window into the chest cavity. Under dim light and without modern tools, he looked directly inside a living body. The left internal mammary artery had been severed. It was bleeding freely. Williams clamped it and sutured the vessel shut at once. But he was not done. He looked deeper, and there it was, a tear in the pericardium, the thin sac that wraps around the human heart. The tear was dangerously close to the right coronary artery. A single slip of the needle could stop the heart forever. No margin. The heart was still beating. There was no machine to stop it, no bypass. Williams had to repair the wound while the organ pumped. He used forceps to hold the torn edges, but the tissue moved with every heartbeat. Open, closed, open, closed. A living rhythm. 6 doctors stood around the table in silence. The only sounds were breathing, the heartbeat, and the quiet click of the forceps. Williams rinsed the wound with salt solution. It was the only thing he had to fight infection. Then he threaded his needle slowly. He began to sew. Each stitch had to land exactly right. 1 millimeter off, and the needle could puncture the heart. No second try. The hands that once held scissors in a barber shop now held a surgical needle against a beating heart. He stitched without trembling. One stitch, then another. The pericardium slowly closed. The 6 witnesses barely breathed. The room was perfectly, completely still. The final stitch went in. Williams inspected the work. The pericardium held, no leaking. The heart kept its rhythm, strong, steady. He closed the chest, stitched the rib back in place, stitched the skin. The operation was over. James Cornish was alive on the table. The next day, Cornish opened his eyes. Within a week, he sat up in bed. No one in that room could fully process what had just happened. 51 days later, James Cornish walked out of Provident Hospital under his own power. He lived for another 20 years after that. Daniel Hale Williams, a former barber from Pennsylvania, had just completed the first successful open-heart surgery on record. The heart-lung bypass machine would not arrive until 1953. The first heart transplant came in 1967. Williams did this decades before. He had no technology, no precedent, no safety net, just knowledge, steady hands, and the will to do what every expert said was fatal. What happened in that small room on the south side of Chicago should have made Williams one of the most famous names in all of America. It did not, but the story of Dr. Dan was far from over. His legacy was just beginning, and so were the obstacles still ahead of him. The news spread across the country. Papers praised the surgery. Williams had opened a door that the medical world said could not open. But history requires honesty. A surgeon named Henry Dalton in St. Louis had repaired a pericardium 2 years before Williams did. Dalton never published his results. Williams never knew about it. What remains true is that Williams succeeded against all the odds. In 1894, Williams was named chief surgeon at Freedmen's Hospital in Washington. It was the top medical post for any black physician. He transformed the institution. He cut the rate of patient loss. He modernized every ward. He trained the next generation of surgeons. In 1895, he co-founded the National Medical Association. It existed because the American Medical Association still barred black doctors. He married Alice Johnson in 1898 and returned to Chicago. A year later, he began teaching surgery at Meharry Medical College. Meharry was the oldest medical school for black students in the country. Williams taught there as a volunteer for over 20 years. He told those students they could no longer sit idly deploring the conditions around them. They had to act. Those were his exact words. In 1913, he became a charter member of the American College of Surgeons. He was the only black physician on the founding roster. A colleague later said his greatest pride was knowing he helped shape most of the outstanding black surgeons of that entire generation. By any measure, Daniel Hale Williams should be remembered as one of the greatest Americans who ever lived. That is not what happened. In later years, he faced conflicts within the black medical community. Politics and rivalries pushed him to the margins of his legacy. In 1924, his wife Alice passed away. Williams lost the person closest to him. His health began to decline steadily from that point on. In 1926, he suffered a stroke. He could no longer perform surgery. The hands that once sewed a beating heart were now still for good. He retreated to Idlewild, Michigan, a resort community built for black families. He lived his final years there, far from public life. On August 4th, 1931, Daniel Hale Williams passed away at 75. He received last rites on his deathbed, and then he was gone. He was buried at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago, only a few miles from Provident Hospital. The building he raised from, nothing endured. The man who opened a beating heart when no one else would dare, who built a hospital from nothing for his people, left in quiet. Ask 100 Americans who performed the first open-heart surgery. Almost none will answer. History barely wrote his name down. But here is what happened after he was gone. Provident Hospital closed in 1987, bankrupt. It looked like the final page of his story. Cook County bought it and reopened it in August 1993, exactly 100 years after the surgery. His dream survived against the odds. In 2019, Cook County approved a $240 million upgrade plan. Provident Hospital still serves the South Side today. At Howard University Hospital in Washington, cardiac emergencies are not called Code Blue. They are called Dr. Dan, even now. Still, his name echoes through those hallways every time a heart needs saving. Nearly 100 years gone, and his voice still carries. His Chicago home was named a National Historic Landmark in 1975. Schools in 4 states carry his name. A park in Chicago bears it too. Stevie Wonder sang about him in Black Man. Kendrick Lamar honored him in Prayer. The musicians remember what the textbooks never wrote. But this is the part that stings the most. When Williams graduated in 1883, he was one of 3 black doctors in all of Chicago. Today, only about 6% of physicians in the United States are black. The black population makes up nearly 14%. A 2021 study found that the share of black doctors in America has grown by only 4% over the last 120 years. Williams opened a door over 130 years ago. That door is still barely cracked open. The progress has been almost nothing. When patients and doctors share the same race, outcomes improve and trust increases. This is not about diversity. This is about lives. The Provident Foundation still gives scholarships to black medical students in Chicago. His work keeps producing new doctors even now. Dr. Dan cut into a beating heart with just a scalpel in 1893. The question now is what we have done with that courage ever since. No x-rays, no antibiotics, no transfusion, just a scalpel and a man who refused to let the world tell him what could not be done. His name was Daniel Hale Williams. He deserves to be remembered. Say it, share his story. Do not let history erase him one more time. If you know another name history forgot, leave it in the comments. Tell me who else deserves to be found and have their story told. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. There are names buried in the past that are waiting to be found. See you next time.